Good afternoon and welcome to News News and Views. I'm your host, Don Burgess. And with us today, we have the Minister of Education, Diallo Rabain. Welcome, sir.
Welcome, and thank you, Dawn, and thank you for having me on. I look forward to discussing education as always with you and your audience.
Now, I know this wasn't exactly the start of the school year that you had hoped and envisioned. From your perspective, just the way it started, how disappointed are you?
Extremely disappointed, Dawn. And we've received some comments of people, why didn't you figure this out earlier, and the like, and I get that. The angst of finding out at short notice that you're going to have alternative arrangements is not something that we take lightly. The canceling of in-school learning and moving to remote is not something that we do at the flip the you just do it because it's something to do. We looked at the data. Some things were coming in over the weekend. When we went into Friday, we were like, okay, well, okay. But then things start coming in over the weekend that said, okay, we got to look at this from a different perspective. We're not immune to this, just like the private schools. When you look at what happened to them, Salters in short notice, Bermuda Institute in short notice, and Salters, I mean, in a work academy, less than a day. Yesterday, they announced that today they will be on remote. So we recognize the hardships that it does cause, but we do ask people to understand that this thing that we're in now, it shows it really doesn't allow for us to make these long-term projections in some cases, but in other cases we are able to make the long-term projections. And so we're working with the data that we have. But being in class for our students is, and you as a teacher yourself, Dawn, recognize that being in class is the best place for our students. And we're always going to be fighting to try and get to that situation versus just giving up and saying, let's go remote.
No, I think for some of the parents, it was just like, all right, you made the announcement last Wednesday, a week ago Wednesday, phase three protocols. And then the next day it's phase two, and then the weekend happens, and we go to remote. Uh, uh, they were a bit caught off guard, and you've done a little bit of explaining about, things can change from day to day. So, how closely is the ministry looking at the data, the numbers every single day, and how much time is that taking up?
It takes up an inordinate amount of time because and we let's face it, Bermuda's in a spike right now, another wave, and so there's a lot of information that doesn't come as quickly as it would normally when we were not with the type of numbers that we have now, and so we just have to readjust. I do know, so we're really proactive. We put out a notice yesterday to give an update. We'll be doing one again today to give an update on what next week would look like for parents, because we understand that parents need forewarning and they need to be notified as early as possible what the week is going to look like. It is, and as I said, it's our intent to return to in-school learning as quickly as possible and as safe as possible. You would have heard my statement this morning. We can put all of the precautions in place, all of the safety and health things in place, but if us as a country are not doing the things to keep us as a country safe, they'll all be for naught. There are no students out there running around trying to catch COVID. There's no adults out there running around trying to catch COVID, but there are persons out there that are being irresponsible, not doing the simple things like masking up, washing their hands, keeping the distance, and just doing things to increase the decrease the likelihood of being infected. That is having a profound effect on our students. And it's our students that are suffering now by having to be on remote and not being in the classroom where they should be.
I was going to ask you this later, but I might as well ask it now since you brought it up. You talked about having policies in place and keeping students safe. Uh, and I quote, but the policies within our school buildings will never be as effective as they can be if people outside of our school buildings are not responsible. Sounds like you're calling out some adults, not all, some adults, for being irresponsible.
Yeah, and in that statement, I pulled no punches. You can see it, John. You're on social media. I'm on social media. You hear people bragging. about going to a safety event and getting by without having to show their safe key and different things like that. And I don't wear no I'm not wearing my mask when I go here. And I know it's all anecdotal information that I'm talking about here, but it only takes that one person who does something irresponsible and then goes home, because when we go home we relax because we're in our bubble. But if we're doing something outside that's going to affect us when we come home and go to our bubble where we're supposed to be comfortable, you're potentially affecting persons who had no knowledge or have the inability to be vaccinated to protect themselves. And we're talking about our students or under the age of 12. They cannot be vaccinated, and so they cannot have that extra layer of security around them. So it's happening. We've mentioned the CEO has talked about um, persons not following the travel guidance and sending their child to a camp, and that child was infected and then end up infecting the camp, and then those children go home and they're infecting their parents. Those parents go to work and they're infecting their co-workers. It's a knock-on effect. I know people can't some people just can't grasp it because they're only thinking of their small circle, but the consequences of their actions can have profound effect as we move on. When we talk about a school, if we talk about one school not being able to open, take a middle school in Bermuda that may hold 260 children. That's 260 households that are affected. That may be knocked on to those households may have siblings that are at other schools, and then there's a knock-on effect on those other schools, and then the person's in that classroom. And so that one incident could have such a knock-on effect that I just want people to recognize that it is up to us to keep our schools open. And if we as adults do what we're supposed to do and set examples for our children to follow, we can be in a place that can have our schools open, and we're striving to get to that place for sure.
Right. I know you talked about the knock-on effect. I was at a school last year subbing where three of the teachers were out because they had children at another school, so they had to quarantine at home as well. That's causing a problem for
Hmm.
the school that I subbed at. It's not just the where the student is at; it's the parents
Hmm.
who are teachers in the system as well.
Right.
Speaking of which, also this morning you said, as of today, just over 50% of our students have consent from their parents to be part of the Saliva screening program, and an even fewer percentage of staff have consented. Although we continue to have staff test positive for COVID-19, resulting from the close contacts and other infected persons. Are you disappointed by these numbers, by the number of teachers?
I'm extremely disappointed because everything is only to make it safe for them to be in the building. And so and it's a non-invasive test. It's a saliva test. You deposit a drop of saliva in a tube, and it's tested, and you're able to tell if you are asymptomatic. Typically you're asymptomatic when we get to that, when we have those tests, because anyone who's exhibiting sick signs is not supposed to be in the building anyway. And so it's an opportunity for us to catch anyone who may be asymptomatic and positive and not know it ahead of time. So we can not necessarily have to close down a class or close down a school. And that person can then get their treatment or whatever, and be rest assured and catch it early before it becomes symptomatic, and do the things that need to be done. So we're just trying to put things in place to keep our schools safe, keep our staff, and keep our students safe. And it only can work as well as the people who are participating in it. And so when we look at our private schools, and they boast, over 90% across the board for consent, and we look at us and we're, 50% and under, it's a disparity, and it's a disparity that I do not like to see. And so we keep encouraging our parents to consent. We keep encouraging our staff to sign up.
Currently, how many teachers are out because of
Um,
COVID restrictions? Not necessarily that they have COVID, but because of quarantine rules or isolation rules, they can't actually be at the school.
Yes, actually, the commissioner gave me an update. It's dropped. The release we sent out earlier this week said 130, and she said, I believe that's dropped down to. She said, I'm looking through my notes. I believe she said 80. It's dropped down to 80, but that doesn't indicate persons who are actually positive and persons who are actually just out because they're deemed close contact, whether it be in school or whether it be from someone else. And so there is a difference, as I believe you were going to point out. There is a difference of being out because you've been deemed a close contact, and but you're not positive, and a difference between being deemed positive and out virtually being sick. But what she did say is that the remote learning has gone well. Yesterday, it's gone well today. I had the pleasure of joining an assembly yesterday. I would join any assembly for any school, but I was sent this link. And so I jumped in on the assembly at one of our primary schools, and to express my support to the school, and they were quite appreciative of the Minister of Education showing up at their assembly. But and as you did also read, the Chromebooks have been distributed to the school. So
I actually saw some at a school this morning that I was at a primary school. This saw them
well,
sitting.
thank you very much. All P3 through P6. We're thankful for our donor that gave us enough Chromebooks to at least supply P3 through P6 with Chromebooks, and those will be used for the remote learning. We've done quite a bit on developing the what we call the blended learning, because the intention is that these children will always have these things within the school system, and they will use them not only at home, but they will use them while they're in class as well, to move forward. So there's professional development in train for teachers. We did some this summer. We did some pilots over the last school year, and we did some professional training this summer, and that was scheduled to continue into this term, so we can get the primary school teachers up to speed on how to effectively use these machines for what the department calls blended learning.
Hmm. Now I know they're at the schools. When do you hope they're going to be in the hands of the students?
Interesting. I just got an update just before this as well. The principals will be contacting parents to set up schedules for parents to come and pick them up. I'm not sure if that will start today or start next week, but it is something that is in the cards. And principals should already have developed these schedules and actually in the process of reaching out to parents to slot them in. Because obviously parents can't come and walk into school. There will be some protocols on how they pick them up, whether it be by drive-through, and they'll also be required to sign the contracts and get the relative all the information on how to log in properly to the education network as well.
Okay. We got a couple. We're going to take a couple viewer questions at the moment.
Sure.
To my list. Elizabeth Vario asked, so why not make testing mandatory in all our schools?
Because testing is a medical procedure, and it's our legislation does not allow us to do it as of yet. It's something that we have explored and we're looked into on if it is possible. It's something that we'll continue to push for in terms of people volunteering. But at this particular juncture, it's not mandatory because it's not something that we can do. Again, it is something that's being looked at
Hmm.
as well.
Yeah, and Joycelyn Bailey asked, why were all schools closed when not all were impacted?
And that is because we want to put in a regime where we can test before we go in. We do know that there can be asymptomatic people, and as the data showed over the weekend, that teachers were just popping up as infected or testing positive, and then there was the knock-on effect of close contacts. And so what we did is decide to err on the side of safety and health, and so what we're looking to do is set up specific testing for teachers this weekend, Saturday, Sunday, and Monday, in conjunction with MDL, and get those teachers in so we can have them and have those negative results, and then look to bring schools back online on a phased approach. And so we're hoping that we're able to get that done so we can start that next week. But as I said, a notice will be coming out this week today from the Department of Education to advise on what next week will possibly look like.
Well, just to try to sneak in a preview, what is the best case scenario for public schools open in person next week?
The best case scenario is, well, I don't want to raise any hopes, but I know the um, notice that went out yesterday spoke about preschools and possibly Dame Marjorie Hope being Hope Academy, being in a position to be open on Monday, and then we'll use the data that is being collected from the testing and the availability of subs, et cetera, to release to determine what the rest of the week will look like.
Okay, I'm not going to hold you to this, but what is for parents? What is the most likely scenario for next week? Will it be like you mentioned, possibly more schools open than the two that you just said, and then some doing remote learning?
Well, one thing done that I do want to say is we have a communications protocol in here, and what we do is our school leaders are informed first, followed by our teachers, followed by our parents, then the general public. And so, for me to say anything in the public uh, domain that has not been coordinated with with our school leaders and our teachers and our parents first would violate the very code that we put together. So, as I said, the commissioner will issue a statement later today, and then that will, as I said, go to the leaders, the teachers, and the parents. Then a public statement will be made on that, on what next week will look like. I do know that she's still looking at the data and crunching the numbers, so that will govern what that statement looks like.
Okay.
But as we said yesterday, I will go back to what has been put in the public domain, that we are aiming to have we're aiming to have at a minimum preschools and Dame back in on Monday.
On Monday. So other schools will be Tuesday or well, at least Tuesday and later.
Well, I cannot say.
Um, we've gone from phase three to phase two protocols for parents who might want to know what some of the differences are between phase three and phase two. What are they?
The difference, and also there is a distinct possibility that we will be moving to phase one. If you look at the phases, Donna, I'm not sure if you actually have them in front of you. The phases are kind of are tied to where Bermuda finds itself,
Mhm.
and as the CMO and the Minister of Health have announced that we are in community transmission. If you look at the guidelines, community transmission translates to phase one. So it's something that we're looking at, and probably if we are in a position to bring schools back, the schools back on Monday, as we would like to do, I'll probably be announcing that we'll be moving to phase one as well. All of the phases are fairly consistent, but as we go from phase one all the way to phase four, there are subtle differences that things are allowed. We were excited that we were looking to open on the phase three. Unfortunately, we came back the next day and said we have to move to phase four. Again, that was based on the data that we received on Wednesday, on Wednesday evening versus what we had received earlier that week. But phase one is the most restrictive, and the biggest issue that I know will cause consternation with our parents is that mask wearing will go from P1 through S4. Outside of that, all of the other things will still remain in place. Temperature checks, the questionnaire. You can't come to school if you're sick. There'll be no mixing of bubbles, no field trips, and there no assemblies in person, no sports days, and things like that. So as we get better and move along the phases, some of those things are the things that get reintroduced. So as I said, we were excited about phase three because it was less restrictive than what we had last year in terms of being able to host sports days. There were opportunities for parents to visit the campus. There are opportunities for assemblies in person with limited number of bubbles. There for field trips were allowed, and things along those lines. So it's unfortunate where we are now, but I recognize where we are as a country, and I know that we will eventually get better and be able to relax those restrictions as we move along.
Now we've had a couple questions about laptops. Somebody asking about P1, P2, and another parent or person asking about middle school and high school. Where are we with those?
Don, we had a very generous donation during the summer for these Chromebooks. And so they have been designed to go into the hands of P3 through P6. We continue to solicit donations to hopefully purchase more Chromebooks. I see questionnaires about persons talking about middle school and high school. Middle school, high schools, for our understanding, are high schools are responsible for supplying the computers on their own. High schools work a little bit differently. High schools and middle schools work differently from the primary school. And so, from my understanding, the bulk of the students, almost all of the students at Cedar Bridge and Berkeley, have have been issued or have access to those. At the middle school level, I don't have the data, but a good many of them have been issued devices by their schools already as well. And so when we talk about Chromebooks and we talk about laptops, those are two different, completely different entities. And so the reason we're beginning at the primary level is we're introduction to the Google Classroom, so the Google Classroom software, and that will be what these things will be mainly used for. When we talk about the blended learning, the idea is to solicit more donations to put Chromebooks in the hands of all primary school students and down to the preschool as well. And so that's where we are with those. But right now we have the 13, I believe it's
1349.
1,349 students will be supplied with them. And in my opinion, that's better than nothing than what we had before. And so again, I have a bead on some more donations, and so we're just hoping we could finalize and formalize that some more and get devices into the hands of the P1 through P3 and preschool.
I think when I interviewed you last year, I looked back and I thought there was about 700 laptops that had been donated by various
Yep.
different organizations. And that, and
And
that
and, the, and those were specific, and those were mainly at the middle school level. Those which would cover the bulk of the middle schoolers.
okay. A question with regard to students traveling by bus to and from school. We know
Hmm.
that they're in the bubbles all day at school, and last year when they left school, they could be mixed on the bus with different people, other classes. Is that going to be the same this year, or is each class going to have its own bubble bus?
No, well, the thing is, Dawn, especially with the minibuses, there were guidelines on the minibuses. You had to sit, you had to keep your mask on the entire time, and keep to yourself. There could be there wasn't supposed to be any shouting or anything along those lines. And the minibus drivers, from my understanding, enforced those guidelines quite strictly. And so that'll be the same. It is you're riding on the bus, you can get on, but you have to keep your mask on at all times. And that's it's amazing to me how much how much resistance we have to masks, but they are one of our best protections for our children from catching this virus in short terms, especially when they're in closed environments like on a bus like that. So the rides on the buses are not that long. This is Bermuda; it's not that long of a ride on a bus. And so to have your mask on and wearing it properly for that particular time shouldn't be that big of an issue.
Okay, just play devil's advocate a little bit here. I know, like during PE classes, under the phase one and phase two protocols, you're not supposed to have them mixed together in the gym, even if they were separated.
Mhm.
But if they were obeying the same distance rules as on the bus, why couldn't we have two PE classes in the same gym?
That came down to class bubbles, and you just wanted to keep the class bubbles, and especially in that particular instance where you're not wearing your mask, you do want to keep it just restricted to that class bubble. What you do not want, Don, is say two P4 classes in the gymnasium, and one of them shows up with an infected person, and now that's automatically spread to the other class because they were been able to mix without masks on while they're doing the PE. It's a simple math for me when I look at it from that perspective. Keep the bubbles separate. And so the idea was that if a bubble was infected, you then know you can isolate that bubble itself and not have an effect on the rest of the school. When we first started this, and the bubbles were not really adhered to, and they were kind of mixing. That's where you would see if there was something that showed up at a school, and then once the Department of Health did their risk management, their risk assessment, and they found out, oh, wait a minute, that particular person went here, 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 when they really should have stayed in one location. That's where they say, well, we now just have to err on the side of caution and shut down, more than one class. That is the intent of the bubbles, is to ensure that we only shut down one class at a time.
Now, I know you quoted from the American Academy of Pediatrics in your speech this morning.
Hmm.
Their release yesterday talked about 26.9% of all cases in the U.S. for the last week um, are children, and they also stated that hospitalizations for children are also on the rise. What concerns do you have about keeping our children safe?
My concerns is, and I think I played that out this morning. We can do this if all of us pull our weight. And so this is not me blaming vaccinated versus unvaccinated people, persons who choose not to get the vaccination. This is just us doing what we should be doing in order to protect ourselves. My daughter is 11 and cannot be vaccinated. I'm vaccinated, but I still wear my mask. I avoid locations where I know there is risk of infection. I wash my hands on a regular basis, sanitize. I keep my distance. I do all of those things because I'm trying to protect the young one in my house that cannot be vaccinated. This is what it's just a level of personal responsibility that I would like to see from our adults. You know, I still get out. I still go out and I still go out to restaurants. I still go out to I might get stop at a bar and get a drink, but I survey the situation and I make sure that I keep myself safe for the persons that I know cannot protect themselves from vaccinations with vaccinations. And so I just ask everyone else, is living with COVID doesn't mean that you can't have fun. Living with COVID doesn't mean that you have to just stay home wrapped in a bubble all your life. But if you do choose to go out, you do choose to do functions, make sure you do them safely. And if the function looks like it's just not going to be something where people will behave responsibly, remove yourself from that situation and find somewhere else to go.
Now, we've talked a lot about rules and regulations and the physical safekeeping of our children. What are we doing for the emotional safekeeping of them?
That is a good, and that is an absolute good question. We talked about this before. Even with remote learning, the those services are still available, whether it be our behavioral therapists, our psychologists, and the like. That those things are still available for our children that need them, and those children that require them who already are getting those services on a regular basis. Those services are aimed to continue even while on remote. But we do recognize the psychological impact that all of this is having on children, and it's something that our student services section is keenly aware of, and will continue to provide the support as requested.
Now, as parents, if they have concerns, how can they get that addressed? Get some extra support for their child.
Um, Parents, I always encourage them to follow the protocol. The protocol is first talk to your teacher. And if and then talk to the principal. If you can't get any joy with the principal, talk to the assistant director for that school. And so between those three, there should be some responses given. If by some strange chance that you're still not satisfied, that's when you talk about going to the commissioner, or messaging myself, which I will then pass on to the commissioner to action. And so that's what I encourage parents to do. Um, Complaining on social media will sometimes get picked up and addressed, but there's no guarantee that it will get picked up and addressed. Going to your teacher, going to your principal, going to the assistant director for your school. That information is all on the website of who to contact. If you need to if you need to inquire about something, it's on the moed.bm website under the Department of Education tab. And our website has also been set up so all schools have a website as well, and all of our schools are being encouraged to develop their websites and put that information on there. I know there are some schools they've really taken off with it, and there are other schools that haven't done as much. But Based on COVID, it's not something that we've been really pushing, but it is something that we encourage our schools to do because it helps. It helps our parents as well if they need that instant contact or who to contact. There are avenues for them to get that information outside of picking up the phone and trying to find someone.
Right. Now, normally these are set for 30 minutes. I know, like you've come on before, you've granted us a little bit more time. What's your time schedule now?
I'm supposed to be back in the House of Assembly, but I can keep going because I don't need to be back right away. This is critically important to me as it is to Bermuda, what's happening with our children. You've always heard me say that education is not a PLP thing, it's not an OBA thing, it's not a private school thing, it's not a public school thing, it's a Bermuda thing. When education is doing right, Bermuda's doing right. And so I'm open to accepting the criticisms, but I'm also open to accepting suggestions of how we can address some of the things that we're doing. And I'm as transparent as I can be, Dawn, to answer any questions that anyone will ask.
Okay. So why don't you explain how the saliva testing works then? So
Okay.
because I saw somebody, Carol Ferris wrote, are more testing sites going to be made available or longer hours? Currently, they're only open for 10 to 3 p.m. when the kids are in school. So I think maybe the saliva testing might be an answer rather than going out to one of the 3 sites.
Um, Dawn, the saliva screening program that we have in the schools, it's not at the school.
Okay.
The representatives from MDL, there's a schedule that goes out that says this is the day your child will be tested, and they show up, collect the sample on that day, and go about their way. And so it actually was a really efficient system last year, and when we did it as a pilot, and so that's why and the pilot program caught some children who were asymptomatic that they would not have known that they were positive, and we were able to catch them ahead of time and not close classes or isolate classes. So that's how good we see this program in helping to keep our schools safe. And so we encourage our parents to give the consent for that. I've heard some wild theories that we're collecting DNA or we're implanting nanobots and all sorts of things. We're not. Sorry to disappoint, but we're not doing that. We are the results are only sent to the parents, the schools, the Department of Education, the Ministry of Education, the principals, the teachers will not know what the result is unless the parent says. And as you know, it's just like with regular testing. If it's a negative result, it's emailed to the parent. If it's a positive result, it's sent to the child's physician, and the physician contacts the parent and lets them know, and then contacts the Department of Health and says that there was a positive test. And the only thing that we know is that a positive test was detected at that school. And then the Department of Health would come later and say, this class is affected, they will have to go on quarantine, or these persons were affected, they will have to go on isolation or quarantine and get tested. And that's all the information that we know. We don't know who tested positive. Unfortunately, what tends to happen, Dawn, is the parents will start calling everybody and say, oh, this person, my child tested positive. And that's literally how people find out, because people tell their information. But if no one actually said it, I mean, you could probably deduce if a child doesn't show back up to class the next day. But typically, before that even happens, we're already given instructions on what should happen to that class.
Okay. Um, okay. Another question here from Malik. Find it on our list. Malika, is there any facilities that are open for children for parents that have to work if they do decide to stay on remote learning?
At this point, Dawn, it is identical to what we've had in previous. We did have facilities open for essential workers. It's not something that we are looking at the moment because we want to get back into school, and that's where our focus is. But unfortunately, it's something that's being looked at, but not something that is in the works to say yes, it's going to be provided in the near future.
Okay. All right. From Pat Lewis, are the primary kids going to get more regular breaks for having to mask all day?
There is a guideline that was sent out by the Department of Health that govern mask breaks. So mask breaks were already built into the system. And so the thing is, last year, there were no primary school kids that had to wear masks all day. But it's because of this particular variant that we were starting the year from with P4s through P6s wearing masks while indoors, while inside their classrooms. As I said, phase one moves that requirement down to P1 through S4. But there are class breaks. There are class break things built into the mask wearing, and so the schools will be responsible for actually administering that.
Okay, I think this is correct. I'm looking at my chart here. It says from 9:30 to 10, and then from 10:40 to 11. And this includes recess and lunch.
Mhm.
And like a brain break from 11:30 to 11:45, and then 12:15 to 1:30 break. So it looks like there were four breaks built into the schedule.
Okay. Well, I haven't seen that schedule. I would assume each school would come up with the schedule that fits. But at the primary level, I think all of the class times are identical. So if that's a schedule for one primary school, it's probably the schedule for another primary school.
Monica Wade asked, "Do the primary school kids have to be tested again before school opens again?"
I would always recommend that if you can get your child tested to know their status. Um, be when we do get towards as I said, we're trying to reopen schools in phases. When we do get to reopening the schools, we're also hoping to put in place some sort of regime where we can set up additional testing centers for our children to just know their status.
Hmm. Jocelyn Bailey, with regard to your comments from a moment ago, said there were saliva testing caught children early, and they did not have to close classes and schools. Was that child not near other children when detected?
The that information comes from the risk assessment that's done by the Department of Health. So if a person is tested positive in a school, the Department of Health comes in and does what we call a risk assessment. So they would look at the protocols, and if the protocols were followed, they would go run one route. If the protocols were not followed, then it becomes another layer that they look at. And so the determination of whether a class, a school, individual, teacher, whatever has well, what happens to them is governed by whatever the Department of Health sends us as after they do their risk assessment. This is, and I must stress, this is not something that's decided by the Department or Ministry of Education. It's not something that's decided by the school. It is something that's decided by the Department of Health. And
Okay.
so they will send just so I can give a complete operation of what happens, right? Is Dawn, we'll get a letter from the Department of Health that states there has been a potential COVID exposure at that school. This letter must go to all parents. We send that letter out. Shortly after that, and it talks about they'll do the risk assessment, et cetera. Shortly after that, we'll get another letter that says, we've done our risk assessment. This is now what has to happen. And typically it's tell the people in this class, tell all the parents in this class that we are asking them to be on isolation or they're on quarantine. This is the date that they're required to test. And so then we tell that class, we send that class the exact letter that the Department of Health has sent us. We are then allowed to then tell the rest of the school that the Department of Health has given us the advice. Everyone's fine to relax. They've located where the issue is, and it's now been taken care of. And so that's how that process works. And it's similar to our process. What happens in public, it's the same thing that happens in private. Um, however, in the indication of in the schools that have decided to with Bermuda Institute, they got their letter and then they decided because of staffing issues that are based on the contact tracing that they were going to go into remote. Similar with Work Academy, yesterday when they sent out the notice that today they were going remote for the upper school. It turned out that there was a significant amount of staff that would have been affected by whatever positive they had at their school. And similarly with Soltis, when they announced on Monday that they will go on remote on Wednesday, it was a staff issue, thankfully for them. So all of us are fighting through these staff issues, because it's not just these close contacts are happening in schools. Believe it or not, the majority of them are happening outside of school. This is where I say, adults doing their thing. It's okay to go out and party. It's okay to go and visit friends. It's okay to do all of those things. Just be safe when you do it.
We're going to take a couple more questions and let you get back to the house.
Sure.
Appreciate you staying an extra 15
No
minutes.
problem, Don.
Okay. For Michelle Johnson, can you explain how the minibuses work for students? Is it available for both morning and afternoon? And do you need to sign up for it?
The minibuses are handled by the Department of Public Transportation, and it's similar to what they did last year. They developed schedules based on the data that they get from schools, and schools would have been the ones that would say that get the data from the parents to say their children catch bus and etc. And so the schedule, from my understanding, would be similar to what was the schedule of last year. And so there was no need to sign up for it. I believe these minibuses, they travel in particular areas, and they just pick up all students in that area and just bunny hop from school to school, dropping off students.
Okay. And Samcat Place asks, what happens when information and or lack of is not communicated to the bodies that they should be in a timely fashion? Parents are tired of lack of communication. Answers should be given, but those persons don't get the answers from your administration. How do you fix this?
That's an interesting question. I do believe, when we look at what the leaps and bounds that the communication from the Department of Education has come along, the Scoop magazine, the Scoop newsletter sent out on a regular basis, even during the summer when school was out. I know that the Department of Education was sending out the Scoop, which gives lots of information. The website, those Scoop letters are also posted on the website. We have social media pages; those things are posted on, and so there's tons of information that's coming out. And so I'm curious to know if that person could contact us directly, if there is any particular specific thing that they're referring to. But the Department of Education does a lot of work on sending out general notices of what's going on with education on a regular basis via the Scoop magazine, and the previous versions of it, volumes can be pulled up as well, because I know in the emails that they send out, it's like, if you missed previous versions, here you can go click here and go back and get these old versions. If they're referring to the the information of that was sent on Tuesday about school being on remote, I believe I want to say that I've apologized for that. It was not something that is ideal. It's not something that we anticipated. It's not something we wanted. We were serious about returning to school. If there wasn't a holiday Monday, we probably would have made that announcement on Monday. But again, Dawn, as I explained, there is a process that we have to follow in order to get information out to the general public, and that is one, we have to inform our school leaders and our school teachers, then our parents, and then it goes to the general public. So sometimes that takes a little bit of time. We try to time it so there's like about 15-20 minutes between some of these blasts that we send out, but sometimes, human nature, we may want 15 minutes, but it may be half an hour, maybe 45 minutes, or there might be a snag somewhere and it doesn't come out for maybe an hour after something else has come out. But we definitely we have improved our communication by being as transparent as we can, as possible, and ensuring that none of our staff are caught off guard hearing something from a teacher that should have come from the Department of Education directly to them first.
Yeah. Kimberly Jackson asks, where are we regarding devices and internet access for all students? The most vulnerable are disadvantaged with remote learning.
Um, and she has a complete point there. Remote learning is not ideal, and it is the last resort. And as a last resort, we are forced to go to it. As we've mentioned here, Dawn, on several occasions, we have received this generous donation. We've issued Chromebooks to all of the schools, and they're ready to be picked up by all P4, P3 through P6 students. And we just got to continue to work through this. There is It's interesting because we talk about the lack of internet penetration, but I think the last report I wrote, Bermuda has high 90s% in terms of internet penetration, which is one of the highest in the world. But I do recognize that just because we have a high penetration, it doesn't mean everyone has access. And so for those persons who do not have actual internet access, the department will still produce take-home packs that are very effective, because it still requires them to be in contact with their teachers in order to get through those things,
Yeah.
and the like.
Going back to what you said about Scoop, I know like before the official press release came out, I saw the notice on Scoop first,
Mhm.
and so
Well, that again, that is the process. It would actually go out in the scoop before it's released to the general public. But there was a hiccup there on the scoop went out prior to the press release being in the can and ready to go, and so that was a mistake that we acknowledged, and so it's just one of those things, Dawn. We had a schedule, but there was a hiccup on the press release being ready to go, and so the schedule went along, not knowing that the press release had a hiccup.
okay. All right. So we've taken your time more than you've allotted, and we're always thankful when you can stay an extra 15 minutes or so.
That's okay, Don. Again, you know that it's when it comes to talking about education, I'm here. And for the listening public, if you do want to send me something direct, I can be reached at minister@moed.bm. That's minister@moed.bm. We return those messages and let you know that we receive them, and I will be sure to have my people forward them to the persons who they need to go to, so they can get any answers that you may not have gotten answered today. Again, I wish your audience just continue to be safe, continue to do the things that you need to do to advocate for your children, continue to do the things that you need to do to ensure that your children are safe and that we can return to in school learning. That is our purpose. That is where our children need to be. That is where our teachers need to be. Sign up for the saliva screening, please, parents. We were just over 50%. We need to get up to that. We need to get that up to 100%. So we can do as much as we can to ensure that our children stay safe.
Okay. And for those people, the email address was just up there. So minister@moed.pm. And
Yes,
again, uh, Mr. Rabain, we appreciate your time and thank you for being with us here today.
no problem. Thank you, Dawn. I appreciate you. And again, stay safe, Bermuda. And
Okay.
look out for a notice coming out today about, we'll have some more information about what next week will look like.
All right. On behalf of Brewer News, I've been your host, Don Burgess, wishing you a beautiful afternoon.